I think as I look at this, I think when most people look at this, they see a clear pattern of deception and intimidation. I don't think there's anyone in this room who doesn't believe that you guys intimidated Mr. Lewis. I think it starts at the October 13th meeting when you called the 9 biggest banks to Washington. They didn't know what the meeting was about. The whole meeting took 45 minutes. You slide a piece of paper across, they have to sign it and write in the amount of TARP money they're going to take. And I think it continues. But my biggest concern is this, again, what I've said is a pattern of deception. Because, I mean, and this is the concern, I think American people need to see this situation because it sheds light on where we're headed. We got Car Czar, Pay Czar, 21 other czars. We got Auto Task Force. We got unprecedented involvement by the government in the private sector, and coming soon to families across America. We got this comparative effectiveness boards want to decide what kind of health care you got to get. So it's important we see what happens when you give this kind of involvement to the federal government. So I just want to walk you through a series of things that took place in this acquisition, and then ask you a question at the end. First of all, I want to start with what some people would describe as an exaggeration. You said the world was going to end, everything was going to be terrible if, in fact, this deal didn't get completed. And yet there are people at the Fed, like Mr. Ashcraft, who said the doomsday predictions were, quote, little over the top. You timed the release of information, so you kept the American public in the dark. You only gave verbal assurances to Mr. Lewis. You wouldn't put anything in writing. You didn't want that out. You made sure that Ken Lewis's testimony to Attorney General Cuomo, he said, Mr. Paulson said, we don't want a disclosable event. We have the Angulo email which said if Merrill decides to file early, we want to steer Merrill to a later filing date. So you controlled when the American people could get this information, even though you're using $700 billion of their money. You deceived the regulators. We have the Attorney General's letter to Congress. And I quote, Secretary Paulson did not keep the SEC chairman in the loop during discussions and negotiations with the Bank of America. The Office of the Comptroller of the Currency was also kept in the dark. We have letters, email from Brian Peters from the New York Fed, where he's talking about an upcoming conference call, and he's, quote, given the presence of the OCC on the call, I think we should not discuss or reference the call with Ken Lewis and Secretary Paulson. Maybe most importantly, and I just want to read from, our staff did good work. I want to read from the memo they put together. You kept the Financial Stability Oversight Board in the dark as well. And let me just read this. Not only did Mr. Paulson and Mr. Bernanke deliberately keep the SEC and OCC in the dark about events at Bank of America and Merrill Lynch, you also failed to raise the issue at 2 consecutive meetings of the Financial Stability Oversight Board, which Congress established to bring oversight to TARP. According to the minutes of these FSOB meetings, it was not until the January 15th meeting that you and Mr. Bernanke informed the board of the government's plans for additional bailouts of Bank of America in connection with the Merrill Lynch merger. So again, you claim that failing to force the merger would have had catastrophic effect on financial stability, yet it wasn't worth revealing to the Financial Stability Oversight Board. So you got financial instability is going to happen, but you're not going to reveal what's going on to the Financial Stability Oversight Board. And then the last example I would point to is one I started with. Go back to the October 13th meeting. You deceived the banks involved with this. I mean, this is based on Ken Lewis's testimony. I've asked this question, talked about this both with him and with Fed Chairman Bernanke. You called the 9 biggest banks to Washington. They don't know what the meeting's about. The whole meeting takes 45 minutes. They said on one, he described the meeting. They said on one side you, Mr. Geithner, Mr. Bernanke, Ms. Baer said on the other side, and you basically tell them they're going to take TARP money, like it or not. And so I have one question, and this, I think this is critical. That was on October 13th, that meeting. I want to go back to October 3rd, because that's when this whole thing started. When we started down this bailout road, this bailout fever that's grabbed Washington, it frankly started on October 3rd when the Congress of the United States decided to give you $700 billion of taxpayer money. And the whole premise of that action was that you were going to take that money and you were going to go buy the troubled and toxic assets. You were going to clean things up and things were going to get back on the right track. And yet, to date, the Treasury has not purchased those assets. So I want to know, when did you know that you could not be able to do what you told Congress? I remember sitting in on the conference calls with you and Mr. Bernanke. I remember when you came in front of lawmakers and you talked about, we're going to buy these troubled assets. And yet, actually 10 days later, you had changed direction completely and instead just injected capital into the institution. So, did you deceive Congress before the October 3rd vote, Mr. Paulson?
Yeah, let me...
and again, pretty clear pattern of what's taking place.
Well, unfortunately, I don't think I have time to respond to every question you asked or every statement you made, many of which I disagree with. But let me get to the TARP, because I think that's critical. We went to Congress And when we asked for authority to buy illiquid assets, we also recognized we needed flexibility. And we worked with Congress to make sure that we had the flexibility to deal with whatever we had coming at us. Congress, I believe, knew they were giving us this flexibility, and thank goodness they did give us that flexibility. Now, what happened in the last few days before we got the TARP legislation, which passed on October 3rd, and in the week after we got the TARP legislation, the markets continued to freeze up. We had a whole series of bank failures overseas. 5 or 6 different countries had to intervene to rescue their banks. Market participants were clamoring for us to do something quickly. We needed to do something quickly. And the way we were able to do something quickly and make a difference, and make a dramatic difference, and prevent something very dire from happening was to make the change and inject capital. And I would say one other thing. I think subsequent events have proven unequivocally that there is not an easy, quick way to purchase illiquid assets. So when did I come to the conclusion that we needed to move and do something? It was sometime.
Sometime between October 3rd and October 13th.
Well, it
obviously.
No, it was not.
My question is, was it before October 3rd?
It wasn't. I would say.
Would you disagree? Wouldn't you say the main point that you and Mr. Bernanke sold, and I didn't go along with this, I thought it was a crazy plan. The main point you sold to the Congress of the United States was we were going to go in and buy these toxic troubled assets.
Well, I would say this.
Would you agree?
Yeah,
that was the main point.
That was,
and it changed in 10 days.
Well, let me say this. That was the main thrust, and that's what we talked about. But we, from the beginning, wanted flexibility. Congress wanted to give us flexibility. It was very good that Congress gave us flexibility.
Gentleman's time has expired. I now yield to